Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in Zeifmans Presents Entrepreneurship in Focus Digital Transition Series. Today, we'll be talking about cybersecurity. Undoubtedly, all of us have heard those various news stories about hackers gaining access to some of the most protected and confidential information and data. It seems like the scope of the threat keeps growing. No organization is immune. Small and mid-sized enterprises, municipalities, provincial and federal government, they all face such threats. And in particular, small to mid-sized businesses seems even more prone to cyber attacks as they typically have limited resources. They don't have fully staffed IT department, or they don't have enough staffing needed for 24/7 vigilance. What is at stake and what can be done to address this growing threat? Let's ask some of the best experts in the field. I have today with me Steve Rainville, President and CEO of CYDEF, and Michael Noory, Senior Threat Hunter at CYDEF. Welcome, Steve and Michael.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Thanks, Ahmed.
Thank you for joining the conversation today. And this is a topic which, when I talk to my clients, a lot of my clients don't really realize the importance of this issue until they are they have to deal with it, and that's generally too late. So that's where I really wanted to explore this with you in terms of the first topic being when a business should think about this, and what kind of what kind of threat horizon they are currently facing. So if I'll appreciate if Steve, if you can start the conversation, and then we can get Michael's view.
Thanks, Ahmed. Really, cybersecurity. And obviously, we're both very biased, and when it should start, as soon as you have devices that are connected to the internet. And today, that means pretty much everyone, all the time. Whether it starts with something like your phone, laptops, and whatnot, there's always a risk. So cybersecurity has to be something that we consider these days, and it grows as you build your business and you have more sensitive information, you're working with more and more customers online, all of that, whether it's for the business reputation, customer service, and privacy, you need to think more and more about cybersecurity, and that grows obviously with the environment, and you have to manage the risks accordingly.
Yeah, and a lot of people will think, okay, well, I'm just a small business. It doesn't really apply to me right now because no one wants to hack me. What's interesting about my 20 employees?
Yeah.
It's actually the fact that you're a small or medium business that attracts hackers towards you, because they know that in all likelihood you probably don't have a dedicated IT security staff. It's probably the general IT guy who's handling that. So the hackers know that these small companies don't have the necessary security controls to protect them against hackers. So it's kind of a free entry into their organizations, because it's a lot easier than going for something like Google, who is actively using pen testers to try to hack into their organization every single day. So even small and medium-sized businesses are at risk.
And one thing I wonder, at the early on, when we used to think about cybersecurity, we used to think about the online threats. They were kind of not, they were like, okay, my computer is down for a couple of hours, and I'll restart, and I'll do a virus scan, and I'll be done. But now I think it seems like the nature of the threat is changing. Now we increasingly hear about ransomware. Now there's a significant financial penalty associated with being compromised and getting targeted. So what do you think should be the top priority for a small business, medium-sized business, to reduce the risk of ransomware?
Michael, I'll let you go first with, I guess, the best technical recommendation.
Right. So there's a few things. I like to present the issue of defense in depth to clients, because this question by its nature, like what is the best thing that they can do to reduce risk? There's no really one thing that you can do, because if you're relying only on one measure and putting all of your eggs into one basket, if that measure fails, then the hackers have access to your information. So defense in depth is just a security onion. So you have multiple layers of defense. So multiple things in place which are protecting you against those hackers. So what are those things? So one of the most easiest things you can do is two-factor authentication. So if you're starting up a business, or if you have a small or medium business right now that doesn't have it in place, it's one of the easiest things you can do to prevent yourself from being hacked. Because the way that it works is, in the past, we just had our email account, your email and password, and if the hacker guessed your password, then they were in. Now with two-factor authentication, for those of you who don't know, once you sign into the email with your correct password, it will send a notification to your phone saying, was this really you? If so, click yes, and then you're allowed into the account. So that simple step will, according to Microsoft, reduce the risk of being compromised by 99% in the case of automated attacks. So you can use two-factor authentication as well as a number of other things, but that would be the top one.
And speaking of emails, what is I heard that most of the time malware comes into your system through email. So if you can just elaborate on what is the business email compromise and how it is different from a regular phishing attack.
Right. So parts of this, and I'll let Michael dive into the some of the technical details, but business email compromise is not related to malware. So that's one important aspect. So business email compromise is all about how can I do social engineering, just like phishing, but it's financially driven. So how can I convince Ahmed to transfer funds into a different account? How can I? So I might pretend to be the CEO. We need to quickly approve this invoice. We need to pay something, and you get people to do those actions and basically do wire fraud or money fraud, right? And to transfer funds into a different bank account. One of the examples I had seen is pretty much that, where people had compromised an email system and then had modified an invoice for a customer, and they kept resending that and saying, well, by the way, please note our new banking information here. And, we've now transferred, we've created a new bank account in Mexico. Please pay to this new routing number, right? So people that just follow that process say, okay, sure, let's go ahead. Very fast and efficient and low tech way to be able to do those compromises. Whereas phishing and the malware is, let's create a link, convince you to download it, and then do additional steps. So business email compromise can actually has impacts of multiple billions of dollars every year with that type of fraud.
Wow. So you're basically unwilling, without knowing, you are cooperating with the hackers and actually transferring the funds to the account they have just provided you. Wow.
Yes. On the flip side, it's also, well, I won't say trivial, to prevent, but it doesn't have to be based in a lot of technology, right? Because this is, accounting or financial processes and procedures. The folks involved in this will still try to bring a sense of urgency, and it has to be done now. And please bypass, all the reviews and approvals and whatnot. So for whoever is involved in these type of activities, it's really to a certain extent be by the book, right? What's the procedure? How do we do this? It's not normal for the CEO or the owner to ask for $100,000 transfer or changing bank accounts for one of my suppliers. They just don't send that on on the latest invoice. They would talk to you about something else. So it's doing those validations and just being a little skeptical about the sudden changes in any procedure.
Yeah, so that's, Steve, really good point, because I remember having these conversations with some of my clients and who are in the technology space, and they frequently tell me that it's generally the human error which starts the process, and then they build on that. And so, is that true? Is that true that a large portion of these attacks are because somebody failed to follow a proper process, or clicked on a link if not supposed to link? Are we really talking about, ultimately insiders, the employees, the humans involved in the processes causing or starting this this ultimate process?
I'll take this one. So I would say to a degree, yes. So most of the attacks that I see and catch are due to either users, so general non-technical employees, or sometimes technical employees who receive an email that comes from their spouse or their boss, and then they click that and it compromises their device. And then the hacker starts to attempt spreading across the rest of the network. So that's one of the most common ones. Another way that hackers get in is through misconfigurations of software that the company is using. So internet-facing software. That is also, to a degree, a user error. So that's an error on the part of the IT admin that set it up. So oftentimes in cybersecurity, it is a person that has made an error somehow, either a technical one or not, and that has given a hacker a way in. So what we recommend, or what I recommend, is just expect that people will make these errors and then plan accordingly. So, for example, in the case of a cyber incident, so a cyber attack which has compromised a device, we always recommend having an incident response plan in place. So what does that mean? It means if you are hacked, you're not just going to have a knee-jerk reaction where you decide what you're going to do in the case of a hack in the moment. So you have to have a process beforehand. So we know we've been hacked. What are we going to do? Who's going to manage this? Because I was involved in custom governmental training. So through CYDEF, we would simulate cyber attacks on power grids in an authorized manner. And the groups which had an incident response plan and a manager which was guiding that were a lot more successful in responding to the events and remediating the issues compared to the groups that didn't have that response plan. Because just think of any emergency situation that any of the viewers or you have been in. So in a crisis, do you really want to decide what you're going to do in that situation right in the moment? Sure, there's some level of creativity and thinking on the spot that's involved, but in the case of cyber attacks, they can be quite complex. So you don't want to just hope that you're going to do your best and then everything will turn out okay. You have to have a plan in place beforehand.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the communications as well, right? It's who needs to be involved, when do you notify, and things like that. And Ahmed, you were mentioning, it's often starts with the users. Well, if the systems, if everything was fully automated for one or for all of those automated systems, then it's really, you're reliant on the other security controls, the systems being patched and whatnot. So yes, it's easier to target, for criminals to target staff to try and move around those controls. But where I believe we really need to focus is going back again to what are the procedures, what's the process that people need to follow. Do they understand that maybe internally we don't share links, or here's how we do share documents, how do we send things across to each other? Anything that doesn't fit that, then that can be easier for people to identify an anomaly, right? Because oftentimes you might hear, and even I was using this in the past, as saying people are the weakest link, but in reality is that what we have to come to the realization is that when you have these security programs and you're putting controls in place, and it's the same thing, for financial controls, you're putting those in place because you want people to follow a certain set of guidelines, and then you have these guardrails in case something happens. Well, when a phishing is successful, when a ransomware attack is successful, typically, and this may not be the case for all organizations, but it means that your firewalls, your email, your antivirus, all of those security controls that are supposed to scan and block and whatnot, all of those has failed, and you received a link and you clicked on it. So even the knowledge and whatnot, and everything was very, very well crafted, and then it can execute, and again, all of the other controls are still failing. So to put it all on the person saying, well, you shouldn't have clicked on that link and this is what all the damage it caused. Well, that person is kind of the last hope, right? And that's where, sometimes you need to expect that something is going to go wrong, right? It's just like driving, right? The accidents do happen. And sometimes those accidents can be very grave and cause severe damages. And some other times it's just a flat tire, right? So it's, or fender bender. We need to adapt.
I guess it seems like as the threats are getting more sophisticated, you need to have more sophisticated response to that as well, and you need to be working with experts in the field who can prepare you. I think the best thing is to prepare for it, as Michael mentioned, that you have to have that plan in place before something happens, so you know exactly how to respond to it. So I like that piece of advice. And Steve, if you can leverage on your significant expertise and background in this space, if you can just provide me a little bit of a summary of the kind of services people can expect when they work with somebody like CYDEF. What is it that how your approach is different? How would you help a potential client to be prepared and be protected?
Right. Well, for that as well, thanks for everyone that's watching us live, and we will, provide with Zeifmans a cybersecurity checklist. So we wanted to make this, more than just this quick conversation. We're going to leave some collateral and make it available. Our top 10, where to start, what things should be considered, and part of again, the mindset that we have, just like Michael was mentioning, is that there's no perfect security. It's all about managing risk, and there are some risks that we need to tolerate. So what we are offering is really a monitoring solution for our customers' devices, their endpoints and whatnot, because we do understand that, again, things will slip through the cracks. In the way we do the monitoring, and Michael is part of that team, is to quickly identify the anomalies, compared to normal business behavior, identify, do all the qualification, the investigation, and then communicate what we found, right? Whether it's just a simple policy violation, someone installed a game, or something else on your corporate device, or it's something, the first stages of a ransomware attack, and we need to take more effective or containment activities to mitigate and limit the impact. So that's part of the services that we offer. But I think as part of this, it's really, and again, just like we're doing today, having this conversation, understanding where business are at, what do they need, and if it's not us, because we offer a very specific set of services, cybersecurity awareness training, and others. But if it's not us, you still may need help, and we will refer people to those trusted partners that we work with to offer the right service, because that's really the whole point. Michael was talking about layers of defense and whatnot. There are so many aspects to cybersecurity, and every business is different, that we need to adapt what is out there. But it's all about how do we. The first parts, especially for smaller businesses, I know that in the cybersecurity industry, there are all these criminals, there's all these risks, and it's all about the fear and the fear and the fear. The reality, you're not in business to be scared. You're in business because you're motivated and you want to find customers, and you want to be out there. And the last thing you want to think about is cybersecurity. So really, we're trying to change that mentality around and saying, we're going to help you understand your business and how the technology is being used and what's normal, what's supposed to be normal in your environment. So again, going and aligning with, here are the policies, procedures, what's supposed to happen. Anything that's not according to that, we'll let you know. And that can help you better inform your staff on how to protect themselves, right? And by the same token is protect your customers and your data, investors and whatnot, right? So that's really our mindset, is more on the positive side, and let's understand your business to protect it.
Absolutely. I think your comment regarding education and awareness being the key to start addressing this issue is absolutely the correct approach to deal with it. A lot of small and mid-sized businesses, as you mentioned, they are busy doing what they do. And this is something which either is presented to them as something really, something they cannot get a handle on, and it's really complex, and it's, and they just, roll their dice and just keep it ignored. So as you pointed out, awareness and education hopefully can address that, and people can proactively plan to deal with this. Now, I keep reading these news items. One particular municipality got hacked, and they had to pay some ransom. And then some people, there's some talk in the government about sometimes it can be a national security risk, because some of these actors may not be actually just a lone individual trying to profit off of the business. They may be trying to access some confidential information, maybe compromising national security in that process. And some of these are backed by some either rogue state actors or non-state actors who are very organized. And the government has been trying to propose some legislation around it, where they can perhaps, compel people to do certain things, and if they don't comply, they can face significant fines. Can you just shed some light onto that, where we stand on that proposed legislation? Is it likely to pass, and if so, what kind of compliance process we can expect out of it?
I'm not confident that it's going to pass in its current form, right? I think that there's a desire and a knee-jerk reaction right now with the different incidents that we hear, and you can think about something like Colonial Pipeline, and with the current political climate, with Russia, China, and whatnot, we may want to show force and say we need to take cybersecurity seriously, and so we'll put these great big penalties. While it might be an interesting stick, I think we do need to find ways again to motivate organizations to invest in cybersecurity. So I think the flip side might be important as well, is the regulation piece, and you need to be able to talk about these incidents and declare them and whatnot, but also how can we encourage investments in cybersecurity and even just in general IT? Because to me, again, cybersecurity it's part of the quality of your IT services. They're available, they're online, they provide confidentiality, integrity of your systems. But that is a good IT system, right? It works all the time. The people that need access do have access. Others don't get access to the system. You can trust the information that's there. And we're calling it cybersecurity, but really it's how you're supposed to do business, right?
Yeah.
So how do we entice, how do we motivate organizations to keep that up to date? And a lot of times we might have legacy systems and we forget about them. Again, Colonial Pipeline, that's kind of what happened. So the stick, sure, you may need to make one or two organizations examples to get the rest of the a certain sector or vertical to move, but it might also just be, what are the minimum baselines? And you have these compliance requirements with PCI to protect, credit card information. You have PIPA for, our personal medical information, and PII and whatnot. So there are those different types of regulations, but it's figuring out, how do we help the SMBs do that? How do we help? Because it's not a problem with the large banks and pharmaceuticals and whatnot. Yeah. They do invest the money in those. But how do we help, again, 99% of the businesses in Canada to follow suit? How do they make that? And part of that is also the manufacturers and the vendors of software. It has to be easier to implement security, and probably remove a lot of the insecure or bad ways of doing things. If you don't give the option, right? Michael was talking about passwords and authentication. Last week I was at the RSA conference, and they were mentioning that one of the issues is that, let's say you're using a cloud service. Well, if you want to do, let's say, single sign-on or multi-factor authentication, the companies, some of them still charge you extra for that. But because they want you to use the enterprise, edition of the license, which gives you a lot of other features, and all of a sudden it gives you a lot of cybersecurity. Why is that only available to large enterprises, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So if cybersecurity is important, maybe there's some mandates as well for vendors that you have no choice. Here's the minimum feature set that you need to include in any piece of software in the base licenses.
Yeah.
Right, paying for the extras. It's like today, if you'd have to say that you're going to pay extra to get brakes on your car, or a seatbelt, or the airbags. Right, all of those are standard features to protect you in your car. It's just part of the cost, so it shouldn't be an option that you can pick and choose.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here because while I really like what you're saying, Steve, so you're saying instead of using these tactics where the government is mandating that different companies input these requirements to report on when they've been hacked, and it's necessary for them to have these security measures in place. You were saying that maybe it's better to motivate them to go towards these vendors by making it easier to, onboard the different types of software. But I actually disagree, because from what from what I've seen, it hasn't been easier than it is now to engage with a cybersecurity vendor and to get your cybersecurity up to speed. However, despite that, and despite all of the news, companies are still not thinking about cybersecurity, and they're still putting it as a very low priority type of situation, because the people who are making these decisions simply don't have the knowledge required to even understand that they need to make it a top priority. So oftentimes with our own clients, we'll see they're not coming out of just motivation. They're coming because they've experienced an incident. So a lot of these companies, I think, they're seeing cybersecurity as a cost rather than an investment. So if you're seeing it as a cost, like something that you have to take out of your budget, which takes away from your marketing and R&D, then they're going to be a lot less motivated to go towards it. But for the people that think of it as an investment, so you put the cost in now, and then a year down the line, it's not going to cost you a few $1 million for a ransom incident. So that's how they should be thinking of it. But as I said, because the people in the decision-making roles don't even have the knowledge to come to these conclusions, frankly, they're just not going there. They're not thinking about cybersecurity. And so having these mandates in place for, I think it's the financial sector, the health sector, so sectors which really can impact the lives of the everyday person very significantly if they experience a hack. I think it's necessary to input these kinds of regulations, because it is that little fire beneath them that gets them the motivation that they need, because intrinsically, I just haven't seen them coming to those conclusions on their own.
Yeah, thank you very much sorry, go ahead, Steve, please.
I was just going to say is that I'm not sure that regulation will change the perspective as for business owners as is this an investment or a cost of doing business. If you have to comply, and it's part of that business. I do agree where it can become an investment, but again, this goes with experience and maturity, where you can start seeing that, because again, I wouldn't frame it as just cybersecurity. If you have good business practices and then bleed that into IT, right? If you do your accounting properly, if you take care of your customers properly, if you have all of these things documented and things are running in a very formalized manner, normally you have less downtime, you have less frustration, you have less customer churn. All of that just promotes, it's doing better every day. So that includes cybersecurity. You can do little things that will improve and minimize the number of help desk tickets, the number of downtime and lost productivity for your employees, and things like that. So it's those little things that can show up. But starting to say, invest, $500,000 in a cybersecurity program, I'm not sure that people can just say, that's a good investment.
I think I agree, Steve. This is really like, we don't, when we say, it's a good business, we don't say, they have a really good inventory management system. They have really good enterprise reporting system, because that's part of being a good business, right? When you're running a good business, you have those good processes in place, and cybersecurity is no different than another, process which you must have in place, and which you must. And as you indicated earlier, this comes with education and awareness, and that's where we're going to get the buy-in from the businesses to be able to focus on this as an investment. And once they realize, this is just part of being a good business that you have a good IT environment. And now we talk about knowledge economy, the data economy. So that's really where you are protecting all of your assets, right? All of your data is residing in a connected device, and you want to make sure that it's protected. So I really like that view of looking at it just like any other good business practice. So I think we are close to the end of our session. I really appreciate our conversation today. The folks who are joining us now, you've been attending Zeifmans Digital Transaction Series event with CYDEF team. Steve, if at the closing, if you can just share some closing thoughts and just introduce yourself and the CYDEF team, I'll appreciate that.
Thanks, Ahmed. So, again, appreciated this conversation, and hopefully we'll have a lot of comments and questions for future events like this. Closing for everyone out there: look, view the positive side. Understand your business, understand how your technology it works for you, and implement incremental change. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it has to become part of your operation. So there's no one and done. It continues to evolve. So it's just like exercise. You start doing it and you keep doing it for life. So that would be my closing comments.
Michael?
Yes, so I'm just going to return to defense in depth, basically. So think about everything we've said. There are a few different points. So policies, procedures, good business practices in general, two-factor authentication. So we're not really focusing on any one measure to protect your information and your companies. You really want to take that security onion approach. So you have these various measures in place so that even if one of them fails, your sensitive client information is still protected. So that's all from me. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And everybody, please note, we will be monitoring the chat after this event. So if you have any questions, please drop your comments below the streaming platform you're using to view this conversation, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. This has been another episode of Zeifmans Presents Entrepreneurship in Focus Digital Transition Series. Zeifmans is a full-service tax and accounting firm based in Toronto. We are ranked one of Canada's top 20 firms by revenue. Beyond traditional accounting and tax offering, we also have full-fledged business advisory, valuation services, corporate finance, transaction advisory services, corporate turnaround, U.S. tax, estate and succession planning. We are helping over 11,000 clients through every step of their business life cycle. Thank you very much, everybody. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed.